Those hats weren't just for style, they were armor. Every brim, every ribbon, every tilt of that signature Diane Keaton look carried a story. To the world, she was the quirky Hollywood icon who made androgyny glamorous. The woman who could turn an oversized blazer and bowler hat into a fashion statement powerful enough to define an entire decade. But underneath that playful charm was a woman who had been through battles most people never saw. When news broke of Diane Keaton's passing at 79, the industry didn't just lose a star, it lost a storyteller who turned her scars into symbols. Her smile had always been disarming, her humor effortless, but those who listened closely knew that every joke, every offbeat line, came from a place of experience, pain, survival, and most of all, defiance. To the public, she was Annie Hall, the lovable oddball who made vulnerability magnetic. But privately, she was someone who learned to find strength in the very things that once made her feel fragile. From her early battles with skin cancer to the private wars with bulimia that haunted her youth, Diane didn't just survive Hollywood, she outlasted its expectations. And that's what made her timeless. Because while her hats may have shaded her from the sun, they also shielded something deeper, a quiet resilience that refused to let pain define her. But behind that quiet elegance was a story few ever truly understood. And it begins decades before the fame, long before the world fell in love with the woman behind the hats. Turns out, Diane's iconic hats had a story of survival stitched into every brim. Long before those fedoras became her red carpet trademark, they were protection, practical, deliberate, and deeply personal. At just 21, when most young actresses were still dreaming about their first big role, Diane was sitting in a doctor's office, hearing 3 words that would shape the rest of her life: basal cell carcinoma, skin cancer. It started small, an irregular patch on her cheek, the kind of thing you'd expect a makeup artist to cover in minutes. But for Diane, it wasn't about vanity. It was about fear. The fear that the same disease that scarred her family might take her too. In interviews, she later admitted it wasn't just her diagnosis that scared her. It was the memories. Her Aunt Martha had lost her nose to aggressive skin cancer. Her father battled basal cell lesions. Her brother had it too. For Diane, it wasn't random. It was inheritance, a shadow running through her bloodline. She told the LA Times in 2015, "It's a family history. My Auntie Martha had skin cancer so bad they removed her nose. My father had it. My brother had it. It's tricky, this skin cancer. That's why you've got to put sunblock on." And from that moment, she did. Every film set, every photo shoot, every public appearance, hat on, shade up, armor ready. That's the thing about Diane Keaton. What most people saw as eccentric fashion was really discipline disguised as flair. The hats weren't vanity, they were vigilance, and she never apologized for them. Because beneath that confidence was the quiet determination of a woman who'd already looked mortality in the eye once and refused to let it take center stage. Again, but skin cancer wasn't her only battle. It was just the one you could see. Behind the laughter and the oversized glasses, Diane faced a darker fight. It didn't show on camera, the bright eyes, the quick wit, the effortless charm, but beneath it all was a woman at war with herself. Long before she became an Oscar-winning actress, Diane Keaton was just a young performer trying to make it in an industry obsessed with perfection. And like so many before her, she was told she wasn't quite enough. She once revealed that it started with a single comment, a request to lose 10 pounds for a Broadway role. 10 pounds. That's all it took to plant the seed of self-doubt that would grow into years of quiet torment. What began as dieting spiraled into obsession, then into addiction, and eventually into something that almost consumed her. On the Dr. Oz show in 2014, Diane didn't hide it behind euphemisms. She called it what it was. "All I did was feed my hunger," she said. So I am an addict. There was no glamour in her words, no sugarcoating, just honesty. The kind that made you stop and really listen. Bulimia wasn't just about food for Diane. It was about control, about living in a world where every inch of your body could be critiqued, photographed, and compared. It warped how she saw herself and how she measured her worth. But unlike many who carried that shame in silence, Diane did something extraordinary. She spoke about it. She admitted to her flaws, her failures, and her fear. And in doing so, she gave permission for countless others to confront their own. Her vulnerability became her power. What once isolated her turned her into a voice for empathy, because she understood the pain of pretending everything's fine while fighting an invisible battle underneath. She turned pain into perspective. She didn't just admit her struggles. She wrote them into her legacy. When Diane Keaton released her 2011 memoir, Then Again, fans expected nostalgia, behind-the-scenes stories, red carpet memories, maybe a few charming anecdotes from the golden years of Hollywood. But what they got instead was something far more intimate. A mirror held up to every person who's ever looked in one and seen someone they didn't fully understand. In those pages, Diane stripped away the glamour and left the truth bare. She wrote openly about her eating disorder, her insecurities, her lifelong quest to understand love and self-worth. And one line stood out above all the rest. I think I'm a sister to all the rest of the women, and I'm sure men as well, who have had some kind of eating disorder. I'm part of the team. That sentence hit differently. It wasn't a celebrity talking down to her audience. It was a woman reaching out, saying, "Me too." In a world where image is everything, Diane's honesty was an act of rebellion. She didn't just share her truth, she made vulnerability fashionable, and she did it in a business built on illusion. At a time when Hollywood rewarded perfection, Diane made imperfection her brand. She turned confessions into connection, scars into solidarity. Her openness made her more than a movie star. It made her human, the kind of human people could trust, could learn from, could see themselves in. Even in her silence, she kept helping others by example. While others chased youth, Diane made wrinkles a revolution. In an industry that worships the illusion of eternal perfection, she stood still and let time do what it does best: tell the truth. Diane Keaton never tried to erase the years. She wore them like another accessory, layered over experience, humor, and grace. When asked why she never went under the knife or filled her face like so many of her peers, she laughed and said she preferred to see life's story written across her skin. To her, the lines weren't flaws. They were evidence, proof that she had lived, loved, failed, and started over. She often made light of her quirks, her hats, her gloves, her eccentric style, but those things weren't distractions. They were declarations. Diane had built her own language of self-acceptance long before social media made it trendy. She didn't apologize for aging. She embraced it like an art form. And in doing so, she quietly redefined how older women could exist in Hollywood, not as relics or nostalgia pieces, but as living, breathing forces of character and charm. Even as roles for women her age grew scarce, she turned that scarcity into opportunity. Romantic comedies, dramas, indies. Diane brought complexity to every character she touched, proving that experience had its own kind of beauty. She didn't need filters, injections, or reinventions. Just honesty, curiosity, and that disarming laugh that somehow made every line on her face feel like part of the punchline. That honesty became her trademark, the kind that never fades. Her laughter might have been quirky, but her lessons were profound. For more than half a century, Diane Keaton reminded the world that life isn't meant to be polished. It's meant to be lived. Every laugh, every stumble, every confession made her more real, more relatable, more timeless. She wasn't just acting through the decades, she was evolving through them, showing us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just keeps showing up. Her life was a masterclass in vulnerability. She didn't hide her flaws. She turned them into dialogue. She didn't run from her pain. She folded it into her art. From the quiet resilience of Something's Gotta Give to the free-spirited chaos of Annie Hall, Diane played characters who felt like fragments of herself. Funny, awkward, stubborn, but always full of heart. And that's what audiences loved, the honesty behind the humor. Even when she spoke about her battles, her skin cancer, her eating disorder, her insecurities, she never framed them as tragedies. She framed them as truths, lessons to live by, proof that perfection is overrated, but perseverance is everything. Her legacy isn't measured in awards or box office numbers. It's in the millions of people who saw themselves in her imperfections and felt less alone because of it. She showed us that aging could be elegant, that style could be soulful, and that truth could be healing. And maybe that's why her presence felt like sunlight, warm, imperfect, but impossible to forget. She taught us that the best way to live forever is to live honestly. If Diane ever inspired you, share your favorite film of hers in the comments. And remember to protect your own light, just like she did.